Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Ta, and I'm a medical student at the University of Alberta. My project is entitled MRI Texture Abnormalities in the Corticospinal Tract Predict Survival in ALS. ALS is an incredibly heterogeneous disease, both in its biology and clinical presentation. As such, a tool that is able to predict survival would be incredibly valuable, and this would allow for improved prognostication, which would help with patient management. MRI texture analysis is a novel technique that detects hidden patterns in an image that represent structural abnormalities of the brain. The objective of this study was to evaluate texture analysis as a predictor of survival in ALS. For the purpose of this study, 41 ALS patients and 42 healthy participants were recruited. ALS patients were further stratified based off their survival characteristics, so whether they survived less than or greater than 24 months. All participants were scanned at 3 different time points to allow for longitudinal analyses. Texture analysis was performed for all subjects. Now, this first finding shows the regions of texture differences in ALS short survivors in comparison to ALS long survivors at baseline. Here, we identify that texture in the bilateral corticospinal tracts is significantly increased in shorter surviving patients. Next, we evaluated the longitudinal progression of texture in the corticospinal tract over time. Here, we show that both ALS cohorts actually did have significantly increasing texture over time, but ALS short survivors actually had a faster rate of change in comparison to long survivors. These findings may help explain the previous results where shorter surviving patients have the higher texture at baseline. This is likely as a function of the faster rate of change. Lastly, we evaluated the texture maps of ALS patients using the Cox proportional hazards regression model by mapping the hazards ratios at each voxel. Thus, we can identify regions that are significant independent predictors of survival in ALS. In short, the red signifies regions where an increase in texture means that there's an increase in the likelihood of death. Notably, the bilateral corticospinal tracts are red, proving that texture in the corticospinal tract is able to predict survival. This shows that higher texture values in this region leads to a higher likelihood of death. Overall, texture analysis shows that cerebral pathology varies in patients with different survival times, and that shorter surviving patients have faster rates of cerebral progression. Overall, we show that texture analysis is able to predict survival and may play a very key role in future clinical management and clinical trials. Finally, I would like to acknowledge everyone involved in this research, as well as the various funding agencies that enable this work. Lastly, I would like to thank all the patients and caregivers for participating in the study and you for listening. Thank you very much.